This nightmare didn't happen in a haunted house or a dark forest. It happened on a wide open highway under the vast, indifferent sky of the Midwest. I was on a road trip with my best friend Carter. We were heading out to visit some college buddies who had moved 3 states away. The drive was a beast. 15 hours of asphalt. We were young, broke, and arrogant, so we decided we didn't need a hotel. We figured we'd just chug energy drinks, rotate driving shifts, and power through the whole thing in one go. I took the first shift. The first 4 hours were fine, just music and conversation. But by the time we switched and Carter took the wheel, the sun had set, and the monotony of the road was starting to weigh on me. I tried to sleep in the passenger seat, but you know how it is in an old car. The seat doesn't recline enough. The seatbelt digs into your neck, and every bump in the road jars your spine. I spent 4 hours in a weird, twilight state of half sleep, never truly resting. When it was my turn to drive again, I was physically wrecked. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand, and my reaction times were sluggish. I was more tired than I had been before my break. But I got behind the wheel anyway because we had a schedule to keep. I managed to keep the car between the lines, staring hypnotically at the reflectors flashing by. But in my zombie-like state, I made a rookie mistake. A fatal error. I didn't check the dashboard. I didn't look at the gas gauge even once. We were driving Carter's ancient Chevy sedan. It was a tank, but it lacked modern features. There was no low fuel light, no digital chime to warn you. Just a little orange needle that had quietly, slowly buried itself past the E. The realization hit me all at once. The engine gave a violent, jerking stutter. The power steering instantly died, turning the wheel into a lead weight. The accelerator pedal went soft under my foot. The silence that followed was heavy and immediate. "What did you do?" Carter asked, jolted awake by the sudden loss of speed. He looked at the dash and groaned. "You're kidding me." He scrambled for his phone, frantically searching for a gas station, but physics was already making the decision for us. I muscled the heavy car onto the gravel shoulder. The tires crunched loudly as we slowed to a halt. Then, silence. Absolute, crushing silence. We were dead in the water. Carter checked the GPS. "Okay, don't panic," he said. "There's a 24-hour station about 4 miles up the road." 4 miles doesn't sound like a lot until you look outside. We were in the desolation of the Great Plains. No streetlights, no houses, no moon. Just an endless ocean of tall, dry grass stretching out into the blackness on all sides. We debated calling a tow truck, but the roaming charges alone would have bankrupted us. Carter, being the fitter of the two of us, sighed and unbuckled. "I'll go. I can jog it in maybe 40 minutes. You stay here, lock the doors, and watch the car." It was 1 a.m. I watched my best friend step out of the safety of the car and start walking down the white line of the highway. Within 60 seconds, the darkness swallowed him whole. I was alone. I locked the doors and reclined the seat, trying to relax. But the silence was unnerving. Every 10 minutes or so, a semi-truck would blast past, shaking the car violently, then leave me in the quiet again. About 20 minutes passed. I was staring at the rear-view mirror, bored and anxious. Then I saw headlights. A car was approaching from behind, coming from the same direction we had. I watched it, expecting it to zoom past at 70 miles per hour like the trucks, but it didn't. As the lights got closer, I realized the car was moving disturbingly slow. It was crawling, maybe 15 miles per hour. It was an old, beat-up sedan, dark in color. It crept past my car in the left lane. I slumped down, trying not to be seen. As it passed, I saw the brake lights flare red. The car stopped in the middle of the empty highway about 50 yards ahead of me. My stomach dropped. I watched as the car slowly pulled a three-point turn, tires screeching softly on the asphalt. It turned around and began driving back toward me on the wrong side of the road. This wasn't a Good Samaritan. A Good Samaritan pulls over behind you. They don't stalk you. I locked the doors again, checking the buttons twice. The car crawled past me again, driving against traffic, moving at a walking pace. The windows were tinted jet black. I couldn't see the driver, but I could feel eyes on me. I felt like a fish in a bowl. The car continued past me, disappearing into the darkness behind me. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, but the relief was short-lived. A horrible thought struck me. Carter is walking that way. That car was heading straight for him. I grabbed my phone and dialed Carter. It rang, and rang, and rang. Voicemail. I tried again. Ring, ring, ring. Nothing. Panic exploded in my chest. Why wasn't he answering? Had they found him? I couldn't just sit in this metal box while my friend was out there alone with the predator. I made a split-second decision. I grabbed my keys, jumped out of the car, and locked it. I started running down the shoulder of the highway, chasing after Carter. I ran hard. The cold air burned my lungs. The only sound in the world was the slap of my sneakers on the pavement. I scanned the darkness ahead, desperate to see his silhouette. I ran for about 15 minutes. No sign of him, no sign of the car. Just the endless, oppressive night. I stopped to catch my breath and pulled out my phone. I dialed him one more time. Burn. Burn. I heard it. Not in my ear, but in the world. A faint, electronic ringing sound coming from the tall grass off to the right side of the road. I froze. I looked out into the field. About 50 yards away, deep in the weeds, a tiny square of light was glowing on the ground. It was a phone screen. Carter? I hissed into the darkness. Silence. Then a rustle of grass. I stepped off the shoulder and waded into the knee-high weeds, moving toward the light. I was terrified of what I might find. Suddenly, a hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed my ankle. Get down. The voice was a terrified whisper. I dropped to the dirt. Carter was lying flat on his stomach, pressed into the mud. He looked terrified. "They're hunting," he whispered. "Who?" I asked. Before he could answer, the road lit up. Headlights. The car was coming back. We pressed our faces into the dirt. The car was cruising slowly down the highway again, a shark patrolling the water. It slowed down right where we were hiding. A spotlight, a handheld spotlight, shot out from the driver's window. The beam swept over the grass, cutting through the darkness above our heads. They were looking for us. We lay there for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only 10 minutes. The car drove up the road, turned around, and came back. They made 3 passes, sweeping the light back and forth. Finally, the car engine revved. They gave up. We listened as the sound of the tires faded into the distance. We didn't speak. We got up and sprinted. We ran the remaining 2 miles to the gas station without stopping once. Under the fluorescent lights of the station, Carter told me what happened. The car had pulled over next to him. The driver, a man, had insisted Carter get in for a ride. When Carter refused, the passenger door opened, and another man started getting out. Carter had bolted into the field. He dropped his phone in the scramble and was too scared to light it up to find it. He watched them circle the block, looking for him. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, the highway was empty. I still have nightmares about that spotlight sweeping over the grass, inches from my head. This story takes place back in 2014. I was in a weird transition period in my life, between jobs a bit lost and short on cash. I rarely took road trips because of work, but suddenly I had nothing but time. My dad was turning 50 back in my hometown, and my family was throwing a huge surprise party. Since gas was cheap and I had no schedule, I decided to drive the 1,000+ miles instead of flying. It seemed like a fun adventure. I planned a leisurely 3-day trip. The first day was uneventful. I drove until my eyes burned, then pulled into a cheap, no-name motel off the interstate just to crash. The next morning I checked out around 11 a.m. I grabbed my duffel bag and opened the door to the outside walkway. I nearly ran into a man standing right there. He wasn't walking past. He was standing still, facing my door, about a foot away. "Excuse me," I mumbled, trying to maneuver around him. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He was a disheveled guy in his mid-40s with deep dark bags under his eyes and greasy hair. He just stared at me with this dead, intense expression. I hurried to my car in the parking lot. As I threw my bag in the trunk, I looked back. He was still standing there on the balcony, watching me. He watched me until I pulled out of the lot. It gave me the creeps, but I figured he was just a weirdo staying at a cheap motel. I got on the highway and blasted some music, trying to shake off the bad vibes. This was supposed to be my longest day of driving, a 10-hour stretch through the heartland. The first 5 hours were fine. I passed through cities, stopped for lunch, and made good time. But as the afternoon wore on, the landscape emptied out. The cities disappeared. The towns became scarce. Soon it was just me and miles of rural highway surrounded by cornfields and woods. My gaslight dinged. I pulled off at a lonely exit with a single rundown gas station. I filled up the tank and went inside to grab a large black coffee to keep me alert. When I walked back out to my car, I paused. Another vehicle had pulled up to the pump behind me. It was a beat-up, deep red Toyota Corolla. What was weird was how they parked. There were 8 empty pumps, but they had pulled right up to my rear bumper, literally inches away. The windows were tinted almost black. I couldn't see inside. No one was standing outside pumping gas. It just sat there, idling, ominously close to my car. A primal alarm bell rang in my head. "Get out of here," it said. I jumped in my car, locked the door, and sped onto the on-ramp. I watched my rear view mirror. As soon as I merged, the red Corolla came flying down the ramp behind me. They hadn't gotten gas. They had just been waiting. They merged right behind me. I tried to stay calm. It's a public road, I told myself. coincidences happen. For the next 100 miles, they stayed there. Sometimes they dropped back 5 or 6 cars. Sometimes they crept closer. But that red hood was always visible in my mirror. As the sun set, the traffic thinned out completely. It became harder to track them in the dark. Eventually, I lost sight of them among the few other headlights and convinced myself I was just being paranoid. I had about 2 hours left to reach the city where I had booked a hotel. My eyes were getting heavy again. I needed one more coffee to power through. I saw a sign for a gas station and took the exit. It was a desolate ramp leading to a station that looked half abandoned. I pulled in. The convenience store was dark, closed for the night. Disappointing, but the pumps were illuminated and on. I swiped my card and started filling the tank. It was dead silent. The wind whistled through the overhead canopy. I felt incredibly exposed, standing there in the pool of artificial light surrounded by darkness. Then, I saw movement. At the top of the off-ramp, a pair of headlights appeared. They didn't slow down. They came straight down the hill, accelerating. As the car entered the station lights, my blood ran cold. The deep red paint, the dented bumper. It was the Corolla. They didn't pull up to a pump. They swerved aggressively, screeching across the concrete, and pulled up directly alongside my driver's side door. They boxed me in against the pump. I didn't think. I reacted. I ripped the nozzle out of my car, gas spraying everywhere, and threw it on the ground. I dove into my driver's seat. I slammed the lock button just as the passenger door of the Corolla flew open. A man jumped out. He lunged at my car, grabbing the door handle and yanking it violently. I looked through the glass, and I screamed. It was him. It was the creepy man from the motel balcony that morning. He was hundreds of miles away from where I started. He had followed me all day. When he realized the door was locked, he didn't rage. He leaned his face against the glass and smiled. It was a wide, grotesque grin full of yellow teeth. He looked like he was savoring the terror on my face. I slammed the car into drive and floored it. The tires smoked as I peeled around the pump, missing his car by inches. I tore out of that station and back onto the highway, doing 90 miles an hour. I drove the rest of the way to the city with my heart in my throat, constantly checking the mirror. I didn't stop until I was in the lobby of a well-lit, busy hotel. Later that night, as I sat on the hotel bed shaking, a realization hit me that made me nauseous. The man at the gas station, he had jumped out of the passenger seat. That meant he wasn't alone. Someone else was driving. They were a team. They had spotted me at the motel, watched me load my car alone, and decided to hunt me. They tracked me for 10 hours, coordinating, swapping driving shifts, waiting for me to stop in a dark place where no one could hear me scream. I haven't taken a solo road trip since. This happened a few years ago during my junior year of college. I was driving across the country to get home for winter break. I was a broke student. I had barely enough money for gas and food, so hotels were out of the question. My plan was simple: drive until I couldn't anymore, then sleep in the back seat of my car at rest stops. It was a grueling plan. By the third night, I was a wreck. Around 1 a.m., after driving for 11 straight hours, my body finally gave up. I was hallucinating shadows on the road. I needed to stop immediately. I saw a blue sign for a rest area and pulled off. It wasn't one of those nice, modern welcome centers with a Starbucks. It was a tiny, grim pull-off from the 80s. Just a small brick restroom building, a couple of flickering street lamps, and a vending machine cage. The lot was empty except for one other car, a gray sedan parked way in the back corner, almost in the woods. I parked under a light on the opposite side to give us both space. I grabbed my toiletry bag and went to the restroom. It was freezing and smelled like bleach and decay. I splashed cold water on my face, tried to stretch my cramping legs, and hurried back to my car. As I approached my vehicle, I stopped dead. There was a man standing right next to my car. He was pressed up against the driver's side window, his hands cupped around his eyes, peering inside. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice echoing loudly in the quiet night. The man jumped back like he'd been electrocuted. He spun around, letting out a nervous, high-pitched giggle. He was skinny, twitchy, wearing dirty clothes that looked too big for him. "Oh, hey there," he stammered. I was checking to see if you were inside. I need change for the vending machine. I'm thirsty." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. His excuse was a lie. My car didn't have tinted windows. The parking lot light was shining right into it. He could have seen the car was empty from 20 feet away. There was no reason for him to have his face pressed against the glass. "I don't have any cash," I said curtly, gripping my keys like a weapon. I walked briskly toward the door, trying to project confidence. He stepped into my path. He didn't move aside. "Are you sure?" he asked, his smile dropping. "Just $1?" "I said I don't have any cash," I snapped. I pushed past him, unlocked the door, and threw myself into the driver's seat. I hit the lock button before the door was even closed. The man stood there for a moment, staring at me through the glass. Then his expression changed. He looked disappointed. He turned and slowly walked back to the gray sedan in the dark corner. I watched him get in. I should have left right then, but I was so exhausted that my brain wasn't working right. I told myself he was just a weirdo and that I was safe now that the doors were locked. I climbed into the back seat, pulled a blanket over my head, and passed out within seconds. I don't know how long I slept, maybe 10 minutes. I woke up because of a light shining in my eyes. I peeked out from under the blanket. The interior of my car was illuminated. I sat up and looked out the rear window. The gray sedan had moved. It was now parked directly behind my car, bumper to bumper, with its high beams flooding my vehicle. That was it. The adrenaline kicked in and the vibes were undeniably predatory. I scrambled into the front seat, started the engine, and peeled out of there. I got back on the highway, my heart racing. I drove for 40 minutes, shaking, trying to stay awake. I was angry at myself for stopping there, and angry that I still hadn't slept. Finally, I saw a sign for another rest area. I was so desperate, I pulled in without thinking. This one was even worse. It was officially closed. The restroom building was boarded up with plywood. There were no lights. It was pitch black and covered in graffiti. It was sketchy as hell, but I figured, who would be here? It's abandoned. It's perfect. I drove to the far end of the exit ramp, parked, locked the doors, and fell asleep instantly. I slept peacefully for about 2 hours. The silence was deep. Crash. The sound was like a bomb going off. The entire car shook violently. I screamed, waking up in total disorientation. Crash. Another blow hit the trunk. I scrambled up, looking frantically in the mirrors. A car was parked directly behind me, blocking me in. Its headlights were off. Then my side mirror lit up with a flashlight beam. I looked out the window. A man was standing there. It was the twitchy guy from the first rest stop. He was holding a metal baseball bat. He raised the bat and smashed it into my rear passenger window. Smash! The glass exploded, showering the back seat where I'd been sleeping just seconds ago. He moved to my window. He shone the flashlight into my eyes, blinding me. He wasn't giggling anymore. He was screaming. "Liar!" he shrieked, slamming the bat into the door frame. "You said you didn't have any money? Liar!" He raised the bat to smash the driver's window. I didn't think. I threw the car into drive and floored it. I cranked the wheel, hopping the curb, driving through the grass to get around his car. As I sped away, I saw him in the rear view mirror, standing in the dust cloud, swinging the bat at the air, screaming into the night. I called 911, sobbing. I drove until I found a police station. My car was a wreck, windows busted, body dented. The police checked the abandoned rest stop, but he was gone. He had followed me. He had waited for me to leave the first stop, followed me for 40 minutes in the dark without headlights, waited for me to fall asleep, and then attacked. All because I wouldn't give him $1? Or was that just the excuse he needed to hunt me? I survived, but I haven't slept in a car since.